Where do you find God? Almost sounds like a loaded question, doesn't it? I mean, if God was someone you could find, wouldn't everyone be out searching? Well, rather than looking for something elusive, like a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, I reckon it's more about learning to recognise the way God is already present to us in our everyday lives. I'm Lizzie Oakes, and this is Where Do You Find God? Ben Fielding is a Grammy Award-winning multi-platinum Australian songwriter and artist, a prolific songwriter, and Ben has written many of the most sung and loved modern hymns across the church globally, including Goodness of God, What a Beautiful Name, Who You Say I Am, and Mighty to Save. He's also involved in a really amazing project with Chris Tomlin, where they have just released a new single called First Hymn, which is a reworking of the world's oldest Christian hymn, discovered with lyrics and musical notation. There's a documentary accompanying the song, and it's called The First Hymn. Ben Fielding, welcome to Where Do You Find God?
Thank you very much. It's amazing to get this opportunity. It's a great question to frame your podcast, and I can't wait to get into it.
Oh, cool. Very cool. Hey, Ben, so I want to know, we've spoken in a previous interview, and you've told me about some of your work. Did you grow up wanting to be a musician? Like what you're doing now, was that a dream?
I think I always wanted to play music, and I always wanted to listen to music. So I think I was a lover of music before I ever played it. And I was a lover and player of music before I ever thought that I'd get to do it as a job. I fell in love with music when I was really little, just listening to my dad's records and cassettes. And then I would get up and watch Rage, which I don't know, did you get that?
I don't know that one.
It's like a
music video.
Yeah, and it's like, video hits. And,
oh, yes.
There were video clips.
Yeah, I watched all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and I would sit there for hours just watching these, and listening to these songs. And when I started playing guitar, I would sort of sit there and try to transcribe them. But the music that captivated me the most was church music. And I would walk out of church just singing these songs. And it was the thing that captivated me the most. And there was a moment that we were together. It was a Baptist convention because my church was a little Baptist church. And we were at this big room in Melbourne. And at one point, all the music sort of stopped, and it was just the people singing the old song "Majesty," the Jack.
Oh, wonderful
song! And I just remember like my little heart kind of exploding. I was maybe 6 or so at the time, just being like, "Wow!" Like to hear all these voices singing, and I think so. That was always a dream of mine. Was to like when I started writing music, was to go, could I write something that could create that kind of environment where people could all sing something together in unity. And I didn't really fully understand what was happening probably at that time, but like how profound it is to have a song that we all feel like we can sing, and what happens in a room when that takes place is pretty cool.
Yeah, that's really awesome. So Ben, in Acts chapter 17, verse 27, it says, God intended that they would seek him and reach out for him, though he be not far from each one of us. So my question for you today, Ben, is where do you find God?
And I mean, look, the correct answer for a worship songwriter and worship leader is like in the middle of worship, in the middle, and I think that that's certainly true. There's the discovery of God when we come together, when we worship together. We're promised in the scriptures that he's there with us. And we're told in the scriptures that he inhabits the praise of his people, or another way of saying is that he's enthroned on the praise of his people. It's not like he's not already on the throne, like he's not already God, but there's something about unified praise that puts God in his rightful place, and it puts everything else in perspective. So I think worship does play, and it has played a vital part in my life, like I just talked about even as a kid, like learning about God through the songs that we would sing. And, I can't remember a lot of the sermons that I heard when I was little, but I can still sing you the songs. So that for me certainly was a place that I discovered God. But I'm really aware that that's an ongoing journey, isn't it? And you don't sort of arrive at an understanding of an infinite, eternal God that feels like it's ever comprehensive. You feel like you're only ever really scratching the surface. And so you those moments of really profound inspiration and discovery, they're moments and they're signposts in our lives. I think when we can look back and go, that's where I really caught a perspective on the love of God or the mercy of God, or where I felt like part of my faith really came to life. And I thank God for those moments in my life. But I also go, they're really an invitation into this ongoing journey of going, where do I find God in everyday life? Because that's where I spend the most of my time. And so there's, books like Practicing the Presence of God, and there's these sorts of often mystics that talk about how to discover God in all of his mystery. I think art is an incredible part of that, because we start to go, there's ways that we see God that we can only see him through the lens of color or art or music or poetry, because they stand as sort of these profound acts or like mediums of protest to go, like, the world as we see it is not the world as it necessarily is. There's the way we see God is not comprehensive. It's just it's an imperfect picture of a perfect God. And so it's an invitation into a daily journey of discovery. And so then you start to go, well, like, what are the spiritual practices and the spiritual formation practices that I can build, or what we can build into our lives that help us continue to discover God? Again, there's so many brilliant books, but I think, so reading is one of them. I think prayer is a profound way to continue to draw close to God and to discover God in this Lent period. I'm doing it's basically it's a fast, and there's a whole process with a number of my mates. And so there's sort of the asceticism, there's the sort of giving up of certain things to create space for God. So I think that's something that we lose a little bit in Western modern Christianity, because we try to sometimes, I've done this for a lot of my life, tried to add God into my life, and we don't leave a lot of room for him. We just try to add him in where it works. So I think that's a good thing to do, become in the habit of creating space.
Yeah.
But I found it really challenging over this last little period where we've been carving out a time of prayer, which is more silent prayer.
I love silent prayer.
Isn't it profound? Because you find your mind racing.
Oh,
and
yeah.
You go, gee, when I sit still, my mind races, and I realize like how even mentally I don't leave a lot of space for God. And then I'm quick to pick up my phone and check an email or check the news or whatever it is. And there's all these things that we build into our lives that become clutter, and they're in and of themselves not necessarily good or bad. They fill up our time and our minds. And so I think sometimes we do need those moments of reset and recalibration where we go, I'm going to just intentionally carve out some more space. And even if it's just saying, I've heard it said by a monk. He was saying to my friend that I'm doing this with, he said, you should give God an hour of silence a day. And my friend said, there's no way I can do that. He's like, if you can't do that, start with half an hour.
Yeah.
And if you can't do that, start with 10 minutes. If you can't do that, start with 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And he's just like, the point being, I think he might have said, and if you can't do 5 minutes, find a different faith. I think he might have said something like that. But even if you're not going to go that far, just the idea of kind of going, can I carve out just even a little window of time where I just sit and I go, okay, how do I need to see God more clearly today?
Yeah.
And I think because, like what you said at that scripture, we're reminded again and again in the scripture that those who seek the Lord will find him, that the heart of God is not to be absent and distant and mysterious. There's always going to be a mystery to God, but he wants to be found.
Yeah.
And that his promise is when we seek him, we find him.
Yeah. And Ben, this God that you do find, say, just in your everyday life, what's this God like?
Okay, I think I'm going to tell a story about my little boy because I think he sort of said it so well. And we were at a church in America, and in their kids program, they said, put your hand up if you've seen God. And he's just so literal, my boy, that he's like, well, I haven't seen God. So his hand doesn't go up. And they say like, well, put your hand up if you'd like prayer to be able to see God. And he's like, for sure. So he puts his hand up and they pray for him, and then they said, close your eyes as we're praying. And then they say to him, okay, now can you see God? What do you see? And he says, all I can see is black, because he's got his eyes closed. And so, apart from being super cute, he was like, I just didn't see anything. I was like, okay, but what they're asking you is, but how do you picture God? How do you imagine God? He said, well, I see God with a big white beard, and he's got kind eyes and a love heart t-shirt. And I said to him, buddy, that's pretty much how I see God. God is kind. God is love. God is desperate to know people and for people to know him. He is, throughout history, been the one to make the step towards us, where some of the most beautiful scriptures that you'll read, like the story of the prodigal son coming back to this father that goes running towards him. The story of Israel throughout the Old Testament, of God time and time again extending mercy and delaying his wrath and choosing love and another chance and another moment for him to reach out and to save people. He's proven over and over again that that's his heart for the world and for humanity. And I think sometimes we add all these extra steps and we add all these extra, barriers and things that people have to fulfill to be able to come before God and to discover who he is. But I feel like the more I go on in my faith journey, the more I look and go, no, I think Jesus is enough. I think that's the step. And everything else we add, we just got to be careful we're not making it harder for other people than God made for us.
Ben Fielding, thank you for your time today on Where Do You Find God?
Thanks for having me.
If you'd like to listen again, tune in to Sanctuary on Wednesdays at 1:30 p.m. or listen and subscribe via your favourite podcast app and give us a review so other people can find us.